So we are talking about subsidies, but this subsidies is different from the micro subsidies. These subsidies are given to the domestic firms so that they can become more competitive in the international market. So what does the subsidy do? A subsidy reduces cost of production and can make domestic producers more competitive. Now it's competitive, right? So how does it work? Let's see this in terms of a diagram. So what we do is this, that first we'll make the same international trade diagram where we are importing. Okay, so this is demand and supply. Okay, and let's say this is your world price PW. So because the world price is lower than the domestic price, we are importing Q2 minus Q1. Okay, we are importing Q2 minus Q1, and now what the government does is this, that the government decides to give domestic producer subsidy. So when they give domestic producer subsidy, the domestic producer will have a supply curve that will shift to the right. Subsidy makes your supply curve shift to the right, so domestic producer supply curve will shift to the right. From S to, let's say, S dash, the supply curve will shift to the right. Okay, if somebody asks you what's the amount of subsidy, remember the vertical distance. This vertical distance is the amount of subsidy. Always the vertical distance is the amount of subsidy. But if you look at this vertical distance, now what is happening is this, that your price is still PW.
So is the vertical distance?
It's the vertical distance is the amount of subsidy, yes. This is amount of subsidy. Subsidy per unit. Now what is important to see is that the world price still, PW is still the price that is in the market. We haven't changed the price. What we have changed is simply the producers, domestic producers are now more efficient, which would mean the gap which previously was Q2 minus Q1 as a level of imports, now is going to be Q2 minus Q3. In other words, level of imports after subsidy will be Q2 minus Q3. Q2 minus Q3 is my level of imports. You did not penalize the foreign producers, you just made your domestic producers more efficient. Now, why is this sometimes considered better for the domestic consumer? So, domestic consumers like this because the price is still PW. Remember, in the quota and the tariff, the price was going up, they had a loss of consumer surplus. What the government tries to do is that they do not make the domestic consumer suffer and the price is still PW. The imports go down from Q2 minus Q1 to Q2 minus Q3, which means the domestic producers will benefit, the domestic consumers will not suffer because consumer surplus is still A, B, C. But the level of imports go down, and who else suffer?
The exporters and other countries.
Well, the producers in the other countries who are making these goods will suffer, but also maybe our taxpayers will suffer. Why? Because now they're paying higher taxes for the good. Okay, so a subsidy basically makes our domestic producers more competitive against the importer. Now, sometimes if you want to become an exporter, you may give a subsidy as large as this one. Don't draw this, but as large as this one. If you give a subsidy as large as this one, your price may go below the world price. Or you might give a subsidy equal to this one so that you also start to export along with domestic production. Or you stop making your imports happening completely. You don't do that because that's too much money spent, but actually if you look at US, apparently US is one of the exporter of cotton, and it's also one of the large sort of recipient of subsidies. So US gives its cotton producers not only subsidies, but subsidies big enough that they are now also the largest exporters in the international market.